The series opens in a small town called Derry, located in the northwest of Ireland, where we meet a 16-year-old girl named Erin. And although the town looks beautiful and peaceful, she can't stand living there because everyone knows everyone else and nothing ever stays private. So while other people enjoy the calm, Erin dreams of leaving the town one day and moving somewhere that actually respects personal space. However, the lack of privacy doesn't stop outside. It follows her right into her own house because one morning she suddenly wakes up to find her cousin Orla holding her personal diary and reading it out loud. And at that moment, Erin completely loses it, storms off to her mother Mary, and starts complaining. Yet Mary doesn't take the situation seriously at all. Meanwhile, Erin's father Gary is standing there listening. But since he's not the type to cause trouble, he stays silent and says nothing. Then, shortly after, Aunt Sarah arrives to check on her daughter Orla before the first day of school in the new term. And while they're chatting in the living room, the TV suddenly reports a suspected bomb near the bridge the school bus is supposed to cross. So Mary instantly starts panicking about the girls, whereas Jerry stays calm and confidently says the driver will probably take a different route. Later on, the girls get ready to leave for school. And as soon as Mary sees Erin wearing a jacket that doesn't match the school uniform, she gets furious. So Erin tries to defend herself, saying she just wants to stand out and have her own identity at school. However, Mary refuses to hear any of it and forces her to change into the proper uniform. All of this happening while Grandpa Joe is sitting there watching, clearly hating Jerry, his daughter's husband, which is something everyone in the house already knows. Then Erin and Orla finally leave the house and meet their friend Claire outside, who immediately gets annoyed when she realizes Erin didn't wear the denim jacket they had agreed on. So, not wanting to be the only one who looks different, Claire decides to take hers off too. Meanwhile, on their way to the bus stop, they run into a guy named David, the same guy Erin has had a crush on for a while. So she suddenly starts laughing louder than usual just to make sure he notices her. And it actually works, because David says hi and invites them to a party that night at 6 o'clock, explaining that he and his band will be performing there. And even though the invitation is clearly meant for all of them, Erin immediately assumes he's interested in her specifically. So without thinking twice, she excitedly agrees. Then, a few steps later, they meet their fourth friend, Michelle, who shows up with her cousin James, a boy who's so shy he can barely speak or even introduce himself. So, Michelle explains that James was born and raised in England, which is why his accent sounds different. And because of that, his family was afraid he might get bullied in a boys' school. So, eventually, they decided a girls' school would be safer for him. And although Erin finds it strange that parents would agree to something like that, she keeps her thoughts to herself and says nothing. Then they all get on the bus, only to discover that a group of girls has taken the back seats, which is usually their spot. So Michelle immediately marches over and with unbelievable confidence tells them to move unless they want trouble. However, one of the girls, named Tina, fires back and says she's Mandy's sister, and Mandy is famous at school for being tough and unbeatable in every fight she gets into. So at that moment, Michelle and the others realize this isn't worth it and quietly go sit somewhere else. Eventually, the bus reaches the school, where they are met by a girl named Jenny, whose job is to welcome new students. But instead of being friendly, she tells them that Tina already reported them for trying to start a fight on the bus. So Michelle quickly says they were just joking around. Nothing serious. However, Jenny doesn't buy it and warns them that she'll report everything to the principal. Later on, they all attend the welcome assembly for new students, where the principal starts by going over the school rules and instructions. Then she suddenly turns her attention to James, officially introducing him as the only boy in the entire school and explaining why he's attending an all-girls school in the first place. After that, she switches to a strict, serious tone and warns all the girls to stay away from James and not even think about getting close to him, since he's the only boy there. And James himself is standing there hearing every word, clearly terrified, and it's obvious he has never been in a relationship before. Then, during the lunch break, Erin tells her friends about the party David invited her to and asks if any of them can go with her because she's too nervous to go alone. So one by one, they all start making excuses until only Michelle is left. And even though she really doesn't want to go, she eventually agrees. However, while they're still talking, their 5 names suddenly get called over the speaker, and the principal orders them to report to her office immediately. And once they get there, they find out that Jenny has already told the principal everything about what happened on the bus. And since Claire is extremely timid, she panics and confesses to the whole story without much pressure, which is why the principal forces them to apologize to Tina. But in the middle of all that, James interrupts, completely uninterested in the drama and only thinking about going to the bathroom. So he asks if he can use the teacher's restroom because he's too embarrassed to go into the girls' bathroom. Yet, the principal refuses and doesn't take his problem seriously at all. Then they all apologize to Tina, but she refuses to accept it. So the principal decides to punish them by locking them in one room for several extra hours after the school day ends. After a short while, boredom starts kicking in, and they realize they're stuck with a supervisor who is over 96 years old and unbelievably strict, to the point that anyone who even speaks gets punished. And while they're sitting there, Erin notices that Orla is holding her school diary, so the two of them start arguing over it, each one claiming she has more right to it, until the supervisor finally steps in and takes the diary away to put an end to the fight. A little later, they notice that the supervisor seems to have fallen asleep while reading the diary, so each one of them starts taking advantage of the moment and doing whatever she wants. But suddenly the principal walks in, and that's when they all realize the supervisor wasn't sleeping at all. Her life had actually ended right there in the room. So the principal immediately calls their parents, convinced that the girls had something to do with it. Then later on, she tells them the hospital confirmed the cause of death was a heart attack. However, she still suspects the girls because of the situation she found them in when she entered the room. And while the parents seem to agree with the principal, the students argue that being 96 years old is more than enough reason for someone to die without anyone touching her. And after a lot of back and forth, they finally manage to prove their innocence, and the principal believes them. Sometime later, the principal gathers the entire school and announces the biggest trip of the year, which will be to Paris. Although she also makes it clear that she won't be going with them because she absolutely hates the French. So the girls get extremely excited, and each one immediately starts imagining what she's going to do once they get there. Then they head over to sign up and discover that Jenny is the one in charge of bookings, and she tells them the price is £375 per student, which is a huge amount for girls who still depend on pocket money from their parents. So Erin, feeling awkward, asks if there's any kind of group discount, but Jenny embarrasses her and says this is a school trip, not a travel agency. Then she suggests they take the money from the school expense deposit their parents set up for them, explaining that she always does that, which is how she manages to go on every single trip. And since Erin has no idea what she's talking about, Jenny explains that it's a special fund parents save for their children's education, and that every student has their own deposit. So the girls love the idea and decide that's exactly what they're going to do. That evening, Erin and Orla are sitting with their families, so they take the chance and bring up the trip, only to be shocked when they find out that none of them actually has any kind of school deposit at all. Meanwhile, while they're still talking, a phone call comes in from Uncle Colm, who happens to be Grandpa Joe's brother, and Colm says he was robbed the night before and is currently at the police station. So Mary gets worried about him and asks him to come over for dinner so they can check on him and make sure he's okay. Later on, the 5 friends meet up at the diner to order some food. And that's when each of them admits they discovered their families are way poorer than they thought, and that none of them has any savings for the trip. However, Claire suggests that if they really want to go to Paris, they should get jobs and rely on themselves. Then James suddenly complains out loud that he doesn't like the food at that place, and says he wants to leave, which makes Fionnuala, the woman working there, lose her temper and kick him out. Later that night, Erin sits down to dinner with her family, and Uncle Colm starts telling the full story of the robbery. But his way of talking is so slow and boring that Erin actually falls asleep while he's still explaining, while everyone else stays focused on their food and barely pays attention to what he's saying, except for Sarah, who keeps trying to respond and asks him more questions about what happened, until Mary gets annoyed and starts signaling at her to let him finish quickly and put them all out of their misery. Meanwhile, Erin is suddenly surprised to see the rest of her friends show up, and it turns out they stole the job board from the diner so they could look for work. And Michelle proudly says it was her idea because she wanted them to apply before anyone else could. But then James cuts in Erin, confused about why she stole the whole board when she could have just taken the flyers and left the board where it was, which makes Michelle feel awkward, so she quickly changes the subject. Then she fires everyone up by reminding them of their dreams and says with total confidence that no matter what happens, she is not missing that Paris trip. And little by little, the others get just as excited and end up forgiving her for what she did. Soon after, they all gather in Erin's room, where she takes charge of assigning the jobs. So she gives Claire the private tutoring job because she's the smartest one, at least on paper. Then she gives Michelle the babysitting job. And there's also a farm job that mostly requires carrying heavy things, so logically that should go to James. However, Erin gives it to Orla instead, which embarrasses James, and for the first time, he actually speaks up about the way they treat him. And after a long argument, Erin finally agrees to give him the job. So now only 2 jobs are left, dog walking and car washing. And Orla gets the dog walking, while Erin takes the car wash. Then each one of them starts getting ready for their new job. But while they're on their way, they suddenly run into Fionnuala, the same woman they stole the job board from, and she already knows exactly what they did. So she drags them straight to Erin's house and tells Mary everything. And Mary feels so embarrassed and worried about them that she begs Fionnuala to punish them in any way she wants, as long as she doesn't hurt them. So Fionnuala takes full advantage of the moment and decides to lock them inside her shop on her day off and make them clean it. That way she gets to enjoy her free day while her shop gets cleaned as if she were there herself. And even though the kids strongly object, they have no choice but to agree to make up for what they did. So they start cleaning with all their energy. But since it's a fish shop, the smell is absolutely terrible, and no matter what they do, it just won't go away. And after several failed attempts, they realize something is seriously wrong, and James finally figures out that he's been cleaning the windows with mayonnaise, which only makes everything worse. And while they're still processing how badly they messed up, they suddenly hear loud music coming from the floor above, which turns out to be Fionnuala's apartment. And that's when they discover Michelle has ditched them and gone upstairs to enjoy herself alone. So they all start yelling at her and warning her that if Fionnuala catches her partying in her apartment, she's going to destroy them. But Michelle doesn't care at all, especially since she's already having a great time with the drinks she found up there. So Michelle tries to convince them that what she's doing is totally fine, and to tempt them, she even lights the drink on fire inside the cups. However, things suddenly go wrong when she drops the tray and the fire spreads to the curtain next to them. And at the very last second, James rushes in with a fire extinguisher and manages to put the whole thing out. As usual, they immediately turn to Mary, Erin's mother, to save them from yet another disaster. And Mary comes up with a wild idea, which is to tie them all up and make up a story that a group of burglars broke into the house and tied them there. Surprisingly, everyone loves the idea and agrees to go along with it. So Mary and her sister Sarah start tying up the 5 of them. But suddenly they hear Fionnuala's voice, meaning she has just arrived at the house. So Mary and Sarah panic and run toward the back door to escape. At that moment, Fionnuala walks in and is completely shocked by the scene in front of her. Then Mary and Sarah come back after realizing the back door is locked and they can't get out. And out of pure fear of what Fionnuala might do to her, Mary finally confesses to her daughter and her friends. And from that moment on, Fionnuala completely cuts them off, to the point that she even refuses to serve them food at her shop. One day, the 5 friends are gathered in Erin's room, all of them focused on studying for the exam the next morning, except for Erin, who is still sad about Toto, the dog that recently died. And although her friends feel sorry for her, especially since Toto was her favorite companion, no one really comforts her because they're all too busy cramming. Then, after a while, they suddenly realize it's already morning, and they haven't covered anything from the material, which sends Claire into full panic mode because she's terrified of failing. Later on, they all sit down to have breakfast with Erin's family. Grandpa Joe clearly isn't happy about James being around all the time, especially since he treats him like just another one of the girls. However, the girls are already used to James and don't mind him at all. Then Erin asks her mother about what caused Toto's death, and even claims that if she fails the exam, it will be because she's too emotionally affected by what happened. So her mother threatens her that if that happens, she'll kill her and bury her right next to the dog in the backyard. After that, the 5 of them head out to school, and on the way, Erin suddenly spots a dog that looks just like hers playing with a soldier. So they all start running after it until they reach the town church, and at that point, they decide to take advantage of the moment and go inside to pray for their exam. Soon enough, the girls start having strange visions and imagine the statue of the Virgin Mary smiling at them. So Erin says it's just hallucinations from staying up all night. However, the others are convinced it's real and continue praying even harder. Then a little later, they notice water dripping from the statue. So they immediately assume their prayers have been answered and that a miracle is happening. But Erin is the only one who knows the truth because she can clearly see that there's a hole in the ceiling and the water is coming from there. Yet when she sees how amazed her friends are, she can't bring herself to tell them and lets them believe it's a divine sign, especially after Michelle says this must be a miracle and that if they tell the whole town about it, everyone will get so busy talking about the miracle that no one will even care about the exam. And Erin actually loves that idea because she hasn't studied at all and is definitely not ready to take the test. So they rush to school, straight to the principal's office, to report everything they saw. And within minutes, the principal calls in a priest from the church named Peter. And at that moment, Erin wants to confess the truth to her friends. But as soon as she sees Father Peter walk in, she completely forgets what she was about to say. And the 4 girls are immediately impressed by him because he's young and handsome. So they forget about the exam too and focus on him instead. Then Father Peter says he wants to hear every detail of what they witnessed and promises that this will be a friendly conversation and that he doesn't want anything to be formal. And to prove that he really means it, he tells them they can ask him any personal question they want. So Erin takes the chance and asks him what kind of contact lenses he's wearing. But he surprises her by saying that this is actually his natural eye color, which only makes her like him even more and pay even closer attention to him. After that, the girls keep asking the rest of their questions one by one until Father Peter finally gets tired and asks them to focus on what actually happened inside the church. Then he suggests that the dog they saw might not just look like Erin's dog, but could actually be the same dog coming back to life in another form, which is why the statue smiled at them to send a sign. So Father Peter decides to take Erin and Orla with him and go speak to their family himself, along with the principal. However, Erin's family finds the whole story strange and assumes the girls made it up just to escape the exam. Yet Father Peter remains convinced that something unusual really happened and even suggests opening Toto's grave to see if the body is still there. While they're still talking, Erin's friends show up at her house and Michelle excitedly announces that the news has spread all over town and that they're basically celebrities now, to the point where shop owners are giving them things for free. So the girls start liking what's happening and want to keep it going. But Erin finally cuts them off, deciding to tell the truth and explains that the water they saw was just coming from the ceiling and that she's terrified Father Peter will open the grave because if they find the dog where it's supposed to be, everyone will realize they were lying and that there was never any miracle to begin with. After a lot of arguing, they come up with a middle solution, which is to steal the dog's body. That way they can convince Father Peter that the miracle is real and at the same time stay special in everyone's eyes and keep getting free stuff. So the 5 of them head out to dig up the grave. But before they can reach anything, they're shocked to hear Father Peter approaching, coming to check things himself, which forces Erin to open the coffin right in front of him. And to everyone's surprise, the dog's body is actually not there. So the whole family gathers together, holding hands and praying after the miracle they believe they've just witnessed with their children. But suddenly, Mary steps away and starts speaking quietly on the phone, which makes Erin suspicious because her mother chose that exact moment to leave, making it clear she's hiding something. Eventually, Erin discovers that her dog never died at all, and that her mother secretly gave it to their elderly neighbor after her own dog passed away and she was left all alone. And since Mary never liked the dog in the first place, she decided to lie and tell Erin it had died, which completely shocks Erin and leaves her not knowing what to do, especially now that everyone believes this whole thing is a miracle and that the girls are somehow special. Later on, the press starts showing up and taking pictures of them, and Erin takes advantage of her sudden fame to talk to Father Peter, whom she's starting to like, only to be shocked when he tells her about a girl he's in love with. And Erin immediately assumes he means her, which pushes her to finally tell him the whole truth, that there was never any miracle at all. And Father Peter gets upset that they lied to him and walks away, leaving them behind. After that, everything slowly goes back to normal, and the newspapers write that the girls were nothing more than liars. Then the next day, the principal gives them a special exam as punishment for the test they missed when they went to the church. Sometime later, the entire town gathers at the church, where the priest announces that many refugees are arriving from Ukraine because of what happened at the Chernobyl nuclear plant. So every family volunteers to take in a refugee and treat them like their own child. And Aaron's family welcomes a girl named Katya, who looks permanently annoyed and doesn't seem pleased with anything at all. Aaron takes her up to her room and starts showing her around, then introduces her to the rest of the group. And the big surprise is that Katya immediately falls for James at first sight and decides she wants to be with him. Later on, the whole family sits down for lunch, and Mary is clearly upset because she found out that her father Joe has started seeing another woman. So Mary and Sarah argue with him, saying he should respect their mother more than that. But Joe defends himself and reminds them that his wife passed away over 10 years ago, and that he has every right to move on. However, Mary refuses to accept it, gets up, and storms away from the table. And all the while, Katya is sitting there watching everything, looking uncomfortable, and clearly feeling like this family is way too much for her to handle. The next morning, all the teens head out to have breakfast outside, while Katya sits alone, keeping to herself, and everyone can't help but notice that she's a bold and unusual girl. As they chat, Jenny walks in, introducing a Ukrainian boy named Artem, who she brought along so they could meet him, and Michelle immediately takes a liking to him, sensing the perfect moment to start flirting. Jeannie explains that she felt these Ukrainian teens must be feeling lost and out of place, so she decided to host a party at her house to give them a chance to meet, connect, and recall some memories from home. Everyone loves the idea, except Aaron, who thinks it's silly and completely unnecessary. However, while they're debating, David shows up, announcing he and his band will perform at the party, and Aaron instantly changes her mind, claiming she's now excited about the event, all because she's hoping David might notice her and maybe feel the same way about her. The following day, the party begins, and everyone is awestruck by Janie's large, lavish home, a sharp contrast to their own modest houses. Each girl is attending more to catch the attention of the boy she likes than to genuinely care about the refugees. Meanwhile, Mary, Sarah, and Jerry are waiting at their father's house to meet Miff, his new partner. But Mary greets her coldly, bluntly stating that she'll never accept her as a new mother, which makes Miff laugh at their adolescent-like behavior, while Sarah ignores the tension, only noticing that Miff looks far younger than her 60 years, which annoys Mary even more. Back at the party, Aaron starts feeling suspicious, convinced that Katya is trying to take advantage of James and doesn't actually care about him. So she keeps searching the crowd, worried and trying to warn him. Meanwhile, Michelle keeps chasing after Artem, who angrily asks her to leave him alone. To her surprise, Michelle realizes that Artem speaks with their local accent and soon discovers that he's actually an Irish boy who had been trying to escape something, sneaking onto the refugee bus and pretending to be one of them. At that moment, Aaron decides to expose Katya in front of everyone, accusing her of exploiting boys for money. Katya defends herself, explaining that she and the other refugees were just collecting funds to buy Jenny a thank you gift for hosting the party. All eyes turn to Aaron with a look of disdain, leaving her embarrassed, and she decides to leave the party. Later that evening, Aaron's family gathers to bid farewell to Katya, who has decided to leave and stay with Jenny in her grand home, especially after Aaron publicly embarrassed her earlier. Aaron feels ashamed in front of her family and can't defend herself. Soon after, Miff also says goodbye to her boyfriend Joe, explaining that she has decided to break up with him because his daughters won't accept her and are still too attached to their mother. Joe, visibly affected, holds a picture of his late wife and stares at it for a long time. The next day, the family is startled when a music band roams the streets, playing loudly, annoying everyone except Orla, who enjoys it so much she wants to join in. The family decides they need a camping trip away from the city, realizing they can't handle the noise any longer. While discussing their plans, Claire arrives, complaining that she can't study properly because she's read the same page over 74 times and still doesn't understand it due to the loud music. She begs to come along on the camping trip, and Mary finally agrees, but only on the condition that she first consults her mother. Meanwhile, Sarah walks in and claims she has read the tarot cards, warning them that danger awaits if they go out today. However, Erin quickly puts her on the spot, mocking her and saying she has no spiritual gift whatsoever to even understand what those cards mean. At that moment, Sarah gets upset and defends herself, insisting she has taken several courses before and now understands these things very well. Then, shortly afterward, Michelle's father arrives with Michelle and James, explaining that she has a lot of work to handle and doesn't want to leave them home alone, so she pleads with Mary to take them along on the camping trip, and eventually Mary agrees. Later on, John decides to borrow their neighbor's tent, since there isn't a single tent large enough for all of them, but the neighbor ends up holding them back, endlessly explaining camping rules and how to protect themselves in case a wild animal appears. After a long struggle, they finally manage to escape and prepare for the trip. Meanwhile, Joe and Jerry get into a heated argument as each of them wants to be the one driving. Yet in the end, Joe insists on taking the wheel, arguing that the map will be with him, and since Jerry has never been good at persuading anyone, he reluctantly gives in, even though he's far from convinced. As soon as they hit the road, Michelle seizes the moment and asks Sarah to read her tarot cards, and Sarah tells her that she'll soon enter a relationship, that fate will send her a handsome young man. Suddenly, Michelle is overjoyed, staying cheerful and excited for the entire drive. Later on, Mary begins to panic, fearing she may have left the money bag at home, so she asks Jerry to turn back and check, but he refuses, pointing out that they've already covered a long distance. Then, Mary suggests pulling over to search through the bags they brought with them, hoping they might find it. At that moment, they are shocked to discover a young man hiding in the trunk of their car. He introduces himself as Emmett, explaining that he's an Irish activist who was trying to cross the border and decided to hitch a ride with them. While everyone is terrified and wants him out of the car, Michelle alone believes he's the future husband Sarah predicted and insists he stay. Eventually, after a long discussion, Joe sympathizes with Emmett's situation and decides to let him continue the journey with them. Later on, they pull over in the middle of the road to grab a meal at a roadside restaurant. They all sit together at one table, deliberately leaving Emmett alone while they decide what to do about him. Meanwhile, Jerry is convinced that Emmett is a threat, whereas Joe sees him as nothing more than a poor young man who wouldn't hurt anyone. As the debate drags on, Michelle grows bored of their arguments, so she gets up and goes to sit with Emmett. With complete honesty, she tells him she's impressed by him and feels a strong attraction between them. Suddenly, Emmett is caught off guard by her boldness and, clearly embarrassed, admits that he doesn't feel anything toward her, pointing out that they've known each other for less than an hour. However, despite his direct rejection, Michelle doesn't seem to care and keeps insisting that he's the man of her dreams, the one the tarot cards promised her. Eventually, the family gathers again to make a final decision on whether to take him along or not, and everyone sticks stubbornly to their own opinion. At that moment, Emmett realizes he's not welcome, so he decides to leave on his own. By pure coincidence, they spot him through the restaurant window, taking their tent, then climbing into the trunk of a car on the road and disappearing. Joe immediately loses his temper, panicking over how their neighbor will react when he finds out the tent was stolen, and he snaps at Jerry, blaming him since he was responsible for it. Sometime later, on another day, Joe and Jerry are forced to go to the store together to buy household supplies. While they're out, Jerry takes advantage of being near the photo shop and decides to step inside to pick up a picture of himself and his wife Mary, which they had taken for her birthday. Then, suddenly, he realizes he forgot the receipt at home and can't collect the photo without it. As he tries to convince the employee of his identity, insisting that he's the Jerry in the picture, Joe, his father-in-law, walks in after noticing his absence. At that moment, Jerry gets an idea and asks Joe to vouch for him to confirm that he really is Jerry, Mary's husband. However, Joe coldly abandons him, claiming he doesn't know the man at all, saying he looks like a complete stranger and that this is the first time he's ever seen him. As a result, the employee refuses to hand over the photos and kicks Jerry out of the store. Meanwhile, the 5 teens are at school when Erin learns from her friend Jenny that a content writing competition is set to open in the next few days. While Jenny is explaining the rules, the principal suddenly walks in and announces that the head of the competition is ill and won't be able to attend, which means they must choose a new chairperson immediately. Without a second thought, Erin raises her hand, even though she has never taken part in any school competitions before, and since no one else volunteers, the principal approves her on the spot. Later at home, home, Erin's entire family is gathered, desperately searching for the missing photo receipt. Meanwhile, Joe takes advantage of Mary's anger toward her husband, and because he despises him, starts pushing her to consider a divorce. As their argument escalates, Erin walks in fresh from school and excitedly announces that she's been chosen as the competition chairperson. However, she's crushed when no one pays attention, their focus locked entirely on their own problems, to the point that no one even responds to her. At that moment, Mary suddenly finds the photo receipt after discovering it was accidentally thrown into the washing machine with the laundry. The next day, Erin arrives at school glowing with pride over her new position, feeling so superior that she refuses to walk with her friends. Instead, she confidently strolls through the school hallways until she reaches the library, where she's hit with a shock. Every single student has withdrawn from the competition now that she's in charge. Erin completely breaks down, terrified that she'll lose her new role just as quickly as she got it. Then, as soon as she calms herself, an idea strikes her. She decides to recruit her own group of friends and pretend they're official members of the competition. After that, they spend a long time trying to come up with a topic, yet one by one, they all fail to suggest anything meaningful that could actually appeal to teens their age. Eventually, Erin comes up with another idea. Instead of forcing it, they decide to search the library itself, hoping to find a subject worth talking about. While they're searching, they suddenly come across an anonymous article tossed aside in the library. Seizing the moment, Erin decides to save herself the effort and declares that this will be the article she submits to the competition. However, the principal shocks them all by rejecting it outright, saying she doesn't approve of the topic. At that moment, Erin completely loses her temper, unable to figure out what to do next. Meanwhile, Joe takes his daughter Sarah to the photo shop. There, he finally admits to the clerk that the pictures do belong to his daughter, confessing that he only denied it before because he despises Jerry, his daughter's husband. Then Joe pulls the receipt out of his pocket, revealing that it's torn into several pieces. As expected, the clerk refuses to hand over the photos, apologizing and insisting they can't be released without a proper receipt. Suddenly, something unexpected happens. The employee is clearly taken by Sarah, and because of that, he decides to give them the photos anyway, just for her sake. Later, at lunchtime, the entire family gathers together, joined by the Photoshop employee after Sarah invites him over to thank him for what he did. Erin is still upset about what happened at school, so she complains to her family about the principal. However, as usual, no one really listens, too busy talking about their own problems instead. The next day, the 5 friends decide to force the principal's hand. They print the article despite her rejection and distribute it to all their classmates. Seeing how much the students admire the article and how eager they are to know who wrote it, Michelle seizes the opportunity. Standing in the middle of the school, she loudly claims the article is hers. However, no one believes her, and they burst out laughing at her. Then comes the day of the talent competition, when the entire school gathers. The event turns out to be painfully boring, to the point where even the principal herself looks fed up, impatiently waiting for it to end. Suddenly, the group is surprised to see their friend Orla taking part, performing a dance routine. Yet, because her moves are awkward and strange, the students erupt in loud laughter, openly mocking and bullying her. At that moment, the group decides to step in and support their friend. They rush onto the stage and start copying her exact moves. Slowly, Orla begins to feel confident, her performance improving dramatically as she dances with pride. From that moment on, the bond between the 5 of them remains strong, surviving every wave of bullying they face, until the series finally comes to an end.